So in our last video, we were using the UML diagram in order to create a class, and that class was keeping information about student objects for us. And the constructor that we created in that lesson received a character, a char, as the gender, and assigned that initial gender to the instance variable gender when the student object was created. So now we're going to look at overloading the constructor. So I can have more than one constructor for an object. So for instance, if I want to have a constructor that receives no information, right? Maybe I don't know anything about this student, excuse me, then I can just have an open closed brace here. And when I call that constructor, what's going to happen if I don't pass any parameters is it's going to assign void or null for the name and 0 for age, false for the Boolean for graduated, and the char will also be a 0 for the gender, right? It's just going to assign all of those instance variables values that are null or 0 depending on whether they're object or primitive data types. Okay, I could overload the constructor again so that now instead of just the gender, maybe I know everything about this student when I create the object. So we'll have the student's name, we'll have the student's age, we'll have the student's gender, and we'll assign each of those values to those initial values that were passed by parameter. So I probably should not have this be the same name. So we'll do initial name, and then age will be initial age, so we don't cause confusion. So then in this constructor, we'll assign the initial age to the age instance variable. Okay, now another thing we can do is we can think about this graduation status. So let's say that at this particular school, when a student turns 18, they're automatically considered graduated from the program at that school. So graduates becomes true when its student is greater than or equal to 18. Okay, so in that instance, then we're going to have an if here. So if age is greater than equal to 18, okay, then graduated equals true. And then we'll say else graduated equals false. Okay, now we wouldn't be able to determine the graduation status if all we know about the student is their gender until we set their age. So notice here we have a method, public void set age, and before we would just have the age assigned, its value passed by parameter, to the instance variable. But now that we know that age determines the graduation status of the student, we'll come back and revisit this method. So we'll have their initial age set to the instance variable's value, and then we'll come back and grab this if else, where we'll assign the value of the graduation instance variable to true or false depending on that age that was input. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile, and we'll test this out and see how it works. Okay, let's come over to our runner, and we're going to create first our first student, and let's go ahead and make this student called using the created using the constructor that receives no parameters. Okay, then we're going to set the name to Marion. We'll set the age to 17 and output that student's information. Okay, our next student is going to be created using the constructor that receives the gender as the parameter, and we'll assign that student's name. Let's go ahead and make Josiah 19 here, and we'll output his information. And then let's try out our third constructor option that we chose. So we'll have third equals new student, and that third constructor, we had we had their name first. So let's say this is our student called Sarah, followed by their age. That student's age is, we'll say exactly 18, and then the gender. So we'll put in an N for non-binary, and we can get rid of these two things because those will be taken care of by the constructor, and we can change this to print out that third student's information. So let's go ahead and see if we need any debugging. And then we'll run and test it out. Did it run? No, it didn't run. Let's try it run again. There we go. Okay, so now we have Marion, 17. Notice the gender is blank there for Marion because we didn't have one to pass in when we called the constructor with no arguments. And graduation is false based on the age of 17. Josiah and Sarah, their graduation both changed to true because of the age. Sarah's age was input in the constructor, but Josiah's age was assigned in assigned with the set age method that we called, and we passed 19, and then that came over here and called our method for set age, and then we can see where it assigned the initial age and tested to see what the graduation Boolean value would evaluate to. Okay, the last thing that we want to talk about in the anatomy of a class section is different types of comments in Java and what they're used for typically. So this one we've been looking at quite often, a double slash in the front. This is just a single line comment. Whatever follows the double slash on that same line is going to be disregarded by the compiler or when we run the code. It's information just for the programmer to look at. Okay, another type of comment that we've looked at before is a multi-line comment, and those are used to comment out entire blocks of code. So if I do a /* and say I wanted to just temporarily ignore this constructor, then I could do */ where I want to stop, and this would comment out this constructor between lines 11 and 14, and that's called a multi-line comment. Okay, I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to put those back. So we've got a single line comment, a multi-line comment. The type of comment that we haven't talked about yet is a documentation comment. And a documentation comment is one that it has a slash star star. So it's multi-line because you can see how everything changed lines there. And I might say that this has a precondition, this program, that students may be entered into this database regardless of age regardless of age, because the program will determine their graduation status automatically. Okay, then we'll do a star slash, and that ends the comment. Now, what's different about this type of documentation comment as opposed to a multi-line or a single line comment is related to something called JavaDoc. So if we use the tool JavaDoc, what it'll do is it'll grab all of these documentation comments that have the slash star star at their start, and it puts them together into sort of a web page format to guide other people, not just the programmer who's responsible for writing this code, but other people, usually on a team that we're coding. It's going to include that information in that web page format for them to read. So it's not comments that are intended only for the programmer, right? These are comments that you would include in documentation about the program, if that makes sense. And those begin with a slash star star, right? If it was just a slash with a single star, that, like this, it's still orange, but that would not be visible in a JavaDoc output, right? We need, two stars, so slash star star, and that would be the documentation comment format. Okay, some things that are pretty common to include when you're doing documentation comments is to include the author. So we use the @ symbol followed by author, and then you would put your name to say that you're responsible for writing this code. Right? Then we could say @since, and that's the date that this code was last released. So let's see, today is the 18th, right? And that just clues people in who are reading the documentation. Oh, this is the person who wrote the code. This is the last time they interacted with that code. Right? You might have @version. Maybe I update this code. Oops, I need to spell that correctly. So @version, I update this code every year or two, debug it, do some upgrades or updates. So maybe this is version 4, 4.3 or something like that. Right? I do @version. And when you do preconditions and postconditions, those are typically, let me end this up here. There we go. So preconditions and postconditions, those typically come before methods or constructors. So for instance, maybe I will put a comment here, a JavaDoc comment that has a precondition that says students may be entered into this database regardless of age, right? And I'll put it with this one because this is the constructor that receives an age. Oh, I think I lost my T there. There we go. So this would be considered a precondition comment, and it comes before the method in which it is associated with. So if I wanted a precondition for the constructor that receives a char, I would place it above line 17. Okay, post conditions, those are things that we list. So post condition. And post conditions tell the person reading the code what is the result of or purpose of this particular method or constructor. So I might have in my list of post conditions that graduation Boolean will be true when age is greater than equal to 18. Okay, that would be a post condition, which is a result that occurs when the code that follows this documentation is executed. So since I have that now as a post condition here, I no longer need this inline comment on line 11. Okay, and since it's a /**, this is a JavaDoc comment, a documentation comment, so that will be readable in the documentation for the